righty. Good afternoon, everyone. We are going to settle into the panel titled Governing the Future, Innovation, Regulation, and Emerging Technology. So this is the first day of college. If you're in the wrong lecture hall, you're still welcome here, but you're going to learn about quantum, AI, and emerging technology. So good afternoon. My name is David Dunmoyer. I'm the Associate Vice President of Campaigns at the Foundation. For this role, I'm doing what I actually love the most, which is I get to talk about technology policy, kid safety, and the issues that really define the future of our great state and country. If you read the description, it kind of underscores what is this mission-critical moment for the great state of Texas. We at TPPF, and all the research and advocacy we've done on technology issues, we tend to boil it down to a tagline, which is technology should serve humanity and not the other way around. And it still, to some folks, it's farcical. Why is this necessary? The reminder up front is there are certain technocrats who envision a future where humanity is inconvenient for unfettered innovation and development, and wouldn't it be nice if we could usurp that by advancements? And we're all here on the stage because we believe in a future where technology doesn't just benefit humanity in that respect, but it actually augments it and makes it better. But it requires a lot of thoughtful deliberation on policy, very nuanced. And the kind of table setting I want to do, and our panelists will do a much better job than myself, is you have virtual agreement across the board on that tagline I mentioned. We want responsible guardrails, but we want Texas to be the tip of the spear of innovation. Does anyone disagree with that statement? That seems pretty fair, pretty benign. And we also can't be too onerous, because if we stifle innovation, our foreign adversaries, China in particular on quantum or artificial intelligence, if they're determining the technological stack, so to speak, they run roughshod over humanity in far more egregious ways than I think we can even conceive of. But the other fold to this that we're going to get into today is there's also a tension not just on the Goldilocks zone of what is good governance when it comes to emerging technology, but what is that interplay between the federal government and the state government? And if you haven't been following what is some pretty incredible action coming against states between United States Congress on regulating technology policy, I know our members on the stage here today will hit on that. It positions Texas all the more critically as the voice of reason when it comes to all things emerging technology. So in prepping for this, I just thought the overarching question kind of simplifies this. So I'm going to read it. How do we forge a future through innovation and policy that makes humanity all the stronger? So that's what we're here to talk about today. And thankfully, I don't have to answer that question because I have a group of expert panelists to do just that for me. We'll start with you, now Chairwoman Angela Paxton. Congratulations. Chairwoman, that's a round of applause.
We'll see, right?
That's right. Chairwoman Angela Paxton was elected to the Texas Senate in November of 2018 and represents one of the most fast-growing regions of the state of Texas. A secondary math teacher and school counselor for more than 20 years, she is the first educator elected to the Texas Senate in over 2 decades. Senator Paxton is an adopted child and the first person in her family to graduate from college. I don't know how many folks knew that. Earned an undergraduate degree in mathematical science from Baylor University and a Master of Science in Education from the University of Houston-Clear Lake. She currently serves as the chair of the Economic Development Committee, the vice chair of the State Affairs Committee, and as a member of the Senate Committees for Finance, Education, Local Government, and Nominations. And I think one of the most important factoids, and this might be out of date, so you might need to correct me, the mother of 4 grown children and 6 grandchildren?
That is correct, and counting.
And counting, that's right. Well, and then to the left, not politically, but on stage, we have, sorry, that, just to clarify. We have Chairman Cole Hefner with us. Chairman, it's good to see you again. I just introduced you, so this feels like we're doing this all over again, so I'll try and add some flair to it.
You can shorten it if you need to say it.
Okay. Chairman Cole Hefner has represented House District 5 since 2017, East Texas, resides in Mount Pleasant. In terms of background for what he's worked on in the legislature, I hit on this during lunch, but a lot of his work focuses on how do we make Texas the safest and most secure state, which is of the utmost importance for this discussion here today. So in that capacity, he's the chair of the Homeland Security, Public Safety, and Veterans Affairs Committee, member of the Transportation Committee, Subcommittee on Transportation Funding, and he is happily married to his wife, Carrie, since 2002, and they are blessed with 7 wonderful children.
And a grandbaby.
And a
I need
grandbaby.
to update that.
And counting. I got it. Yep. This was probably
About this tall.
ChatGPT.
She thinks she's the boss. Yeah, and she is in some areas.
Well, and last but certainly not least, joining us on the stage here today, we have Dean Acosta. Dean Acosta serves as IonQ's first Chief Corporate Affairs and Government Relations Officer, where he oversees all corporate activities in relations to communication, public affairs, and government relations. And he'll explain what it is IonQ does in just a moment here. He has truly an incredible background. I was floored reading it. VP of Global Communications for 2 of Honeywell's businesses, Phillips 66 Global Head of Corporate Communications, and of particular import to the last few weeks here, sir, he had communication director roles at Lockheed Martin and press secretary for NASA in the aftermath of the Space Shuttle Columbia disaster and through the shuttle program's return to flight. If you get a chance to talk to him about his time at NASA, he has some incredible stories to share there. He's local. He earned his bachelor's degree from UTSA. Do we have any UTSA alum in the room here? There we go. And his master's degree in strategic communication and leadership from Seton Hall University. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome our rockstar panel to the stage today? All right, now let's get into it. I'm actually, Chairman Hefner, if I can start with you. Again, your perch as chair of the Homeland Security Committee, you have a unique lens into what's happening with technology, emerging innovation, and so on. In particular, the unique lens into China and our foreign adversaries and how they play into the whole growth of Texas. So can you just start level setting for our audience? What are some of the biggest threats you see facing Texas internationally from that emerging technology lens?
Yeah, I'll tell you. It's first of all, it's important to note with all the issues and the emotions that fly around, so many issues that come before society through social media and things. This threat is real. China's not playing; they're playing for keeps, and they're through their unrestricted warfare doctrine. We're not talking about like kinetic wars, where bombs and bullets necessarily, but they're looking to infiltrate our data infrastructure, and they're looking for any way that they can get in to steal our intellectual property, our designs, all kinds of things. And so it's important that we as a state do what we can. And the challenge with that I have found is so much of this is a national security issue, so it's really under the purview of, you would think, the federal government and the CIA, the National Homeland Security, all those departments. But there is a role for the state to play. And so recognizing these threats, finding out what our authorities are as a state, and then what resources and bandwidth we have to address those. And so we took a big step forward in that arena last session. Like I said, we're still coming into that knowledge and learning more on the fly. It's like drinking from a fire hose. It's a lot. For so many years, China's been working on this, and so. But we've talked to people from the UK. We've talked to people from Washington. And the United States is ahead of most countries on combating this. But within the United States, Texas has kind of been the leader. And last session kind of helped propel us even further to that. We're working with other states and even other countries to help repel that. So it's real. What they're doing with our autonomous systems, with ship-to-shore cranes and drones, in many areas that they've infiltrated. So we're looking forward to having those conversations, meeting with subject matter experts like Dean and others to see what we can do as a state to craft good, strong, effective policy to help keep us safe.
Well said. And hello. One of the contours on that, we'll get more into cybersecurity, is there was a direct mission from President Trump to restore more cyber responsibilities to the state. I don't know how many folks have heard of CISA, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency. Historically, they've been focused on our critical infrastructure, keeping it cyber secure. And that's something under Trump 2.0, it was devolved to a certain extent. We want states to take on those roles and responsibilities. And Chairman's point, we did that in many respects, and there's more work to be done. But for part one on the federal versus state interplay, you're seeing, hey, we need to have operations that are capable on the ground in each state so they can communicate with each other, learn and grow. And Texas needs to be the breeding ground for that. Now, Chairwoman, Senator Paxton, one of the issues a lot of folks know when they hear your name is you are a fierce advocate for our children. And I don't know how many of you all followed, but there was the advancement at the national level of an executive order on artificial intelligence. And it's taken on many forms, but essentially the ethos was we don't want to allow states to regulate artificial intelligence systems. And it was motivated to a certain extent for understandable reasons. States like California, they were really onerous in their AI regulations. The concern was national security. But then in states like Texas, where you've led on so many conservative reforms to, ensure there are responsible guardrails and we're protecting children, you can speak to this better than any other member. Why is that so important, this fight that you've taken up to ensure Texas can defend its children, and what does that look like on your end?
Well, that is really important to me. And, Chairman Hefner has already talked about these external national security threats that we're facing. But you know what? We're also facing them internally. There is a real potential for destroying the future of the United States by destroying our children. And, China is playing the long game. But we have a lot of corporate forces that are playing a short game inside, and they're preying on our children. They've monetized our kids. And so from the standpoint of protecting our kids online, that's a lot of that. We've got to protect our future. We've got to protect our future by protecting our borders, by protecting our national security, but we also have to do it internally. It's sort of like in just a person. You have to be safe, right, in your environment and your outside world. You do those kinds of things, but you also have to take care of yourself. Right? You have to stay healthy yourself. And so if we don't protect our children, we will not stay healthy as a nation. Last night at dinner, it was referenced about how President Reagan used to talk about, freedom only lasts for a generation at a time. And if we don't do what we need to do to protect our kids, which also means not just putting a bubble around them, it means equipping them to live in this world that we live in now. But ideally, that also means we've got to make sure that parents can parent. And so I think that's a big part of it. But this argument around preemption, the federal policy preempting any state policy, it's gotten better, I think. It started out as a moratorium, and if any of you were following this last year, in the big beautiful bill, there all of a sudden showed up when it got over to the Senate a provision for no state regulation on AI for 10 years. We just had come out of our regular session where we had passed really meaningful reform, and the Traeger bill and some other things, things related to protecting kids. And I don't know if you've noticed, but Congress has a hard time passing things. And I'm all for, a national regulatory structure for AI. I understand in just in theory, when you have patchwork regulation, right, that can slow down innovation. I will tell you one thing. If we can slow down AI-generated child porn, I'm all for slowing it down. That's not innovation we need. So it's just not all the same. So we got involved in calling for an opposition to that moratorium. We're successful. And then now it's come out as an executive order. And again, I think it is around this idea of national security, but I don't think we have to achieve national security on the backs of our children or at the expense of our children. So I'll continue to be involved in that. I think one of the things we have to remember as well is that constitutionally, in the structure of our government, the federal government is not the parent and the state the child. It's the other way around. And so I'm about parental empowerment, and so I'm about state empowerment. And the states have to be able to lead on this regulatory initiative around AI to protect our kids and to do a lot of other things. I also think, though, it matters because as we pass legislation in Texas, when we pass stuff, other states pick it up. Because we run through the obstacles, we kind of run point on these things. Other states can pick up good regulation from Texas, and I think it actually will help support creation of good federal legislation as our federal legislators see what the states are doing, and they can see consensus among the states. And I think it allows them to use good policy that they're already watching happen. So I'll continue to be involved in that. I want to be involved in the construction of federal policy, but until we've got some decent federal policy, we have to be able to pass state laws around AI and technology, and especially when it comes to protecting our kids.
Yeah, well said. And to piggyback off that, because long game, short game, Dean, I know IonQ is focused on that long game, and not just as it relates to how China is critically focused on building out quantum and some capabilities that determine really the success or lack thereof of our nation. Can we rewind for folks in the audience who may not be fully aware of quantum's capability? What is quantum? Can you just set the table? What is quantum technology broadly, and how does it fit into this space of emerging technology?
How much time do we have left? I'll probably eat a filibuster the rest of the time. No, I'm sure everybody in the audience is thinking, like, how does quantum factor into, national security, protecting our children, just technology of the future? And really the connection point is around the infrastructure that we have in place as a state. The state does definitely need to lead, and it shouldn't be the federal government leading on regulatory oversight, protection of our children and family, parenting. And quantum can be a solution to what the chairman and the chairwoman were talking about earlier. I think that in a short summary, quantum is going to be, and IonQ as the quantum technology company, is going to be the next evolution of what computers are. And I think everybody in the room probably remembers that ChatGPT moment about 4 years ago where we all woke up and go, wait, what is this AI thing? And how is it going to change the way I ask questions and get information? Much like Google search did, 15 years earlier, like it just changed the way we operated. Quantum is going to be that moment for us times 100. And what it's going to do is it's going to evolve the way problems are solved. It could even be a solution to data center challenges that we're thinking about today, where I'm hearing, about energy resource demand and water usage. Quantum could factor into that workflow of how computational capacity, not only in our state of Texas, but that our nation is going to need to be able to solve problems that are unsolvable today. So quantum in a nutshell is, you have classical computers, you have what NVIDIA invented around GPUs, which is how we unlocked AI, so it's the capacity to give you more computational power. Quantum is going to be the next phase of that. So think of a workflow where you'll have classical computers, you'll have GPUs like in data centers, and then quantum computers that will be part of that workflow. And so what it will do is it'll allow us to, and part of why we have to worry about it now, because when quantum compute comes online, what we call Q-Day, and there's a lot of debate on when Q-Day is, but when quantum computers get to the qubits, which is, you have bits and classical computers, qubits and quantum computers, when it gets to a certain level, it will unlock and solve what current encryption is today. So think of what encryption that we have on our grid, on our energy infrastructure as a whole, our national security apparatuses that we have in place. All of that will be the way we do online banking, the way we do basically every industry, not only in the state of Texas, but for the entire country. And we have to be prepared for that. What is our preparedness for post-quantum world? And that starts today with how we protect our infrastructure, the things that we can actually do today in networking and sensing and in cybersecurity. So what IonQ does is we're developing that quantum computer. We also do the networking. We do sensing, so think of atomic clocks in satellites that will be 1,000 times more accurate than what GPS has today. So think down to the millimeter of accuracy. And then it's the next wave of cybersecurity. So how do you protect? Not only are we developing the computer that's going to unlock and change encryption, but we have the antidote with cybersecurity that can be in place to protect against quantum computing. So why should we care? The Chinese have been spending an enormous amount of money, both from an industrial standpoint of creating this technology. They are ahead of us in certain aspects when it comes to networking, some of their cybersecurity. But as we heard earlier, we still have the technological lead, but it is shrinking. And so the time is now to act. And the good news is the state of Texas, last legislative session, passed House Bill 4751, the Texas Quantum Initiative. So we have a law in place, and now we just need the funding to be able to act on it. So we need to take that framework and now take it from a framework to an execution, and looking forward to partnering with our elected officials to make that happen.
And to underscore,
Everybody gets college credit for that.
yes, yep, and a master's degree, I think, too. Maybe add a PhD by the end of this. To underscore that on the Q-Day component, because Dean, we talked about this, been working on cyber-related issues, thinking about it here in Texas, and actually, Chairman, we worked on this. I believe there's an interim hearing on this, critical infrastructure cybersecurity, town of Muleshoe, West Texas, small town, 10,000 people or less, and Russians cyber infiltrated the water tower system, and they flooded the tower. And it was not one, not two, but 3 different water facilities that were hit in a span of 24 hours. That's the stuff we know, which is scary. But the Q-Day, if China wins, is so much more astronomically scary because it's harvest now, decrypt later. We don't fully know all the information that the Chinese have taken from us. Nothing's happened yet because there isn't the quantum technology to actually make it useful and valuable and use it to decimate our entire grid. So I know we're going to get more into that, but to your point of how important it is to be forward-looking, we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg when it comes to China's capabilities with cyber. Then to be a little more optimistic for a moment here, Senator, you hit on a number of bills last session that were passed, and tremendous kudos to you and other members who worked tirelessly. Do you have 2 or 3 of your favorites on AI, kid safety, just ones that you think position Texas as that leader you talked about that's empowering parents and
I do.
lead the way?
I have lots of favorites, but just a handful at the top of my list. The first one would be the App Store Accountability Act. And I'm so thankful for TPPF's support and help in communicating with people about the importance of supporting the bill and helping people understand it. And the lovely, beautiful, intelligent, and also your fiance, State Rep Caroline Fairley, is here, who was the author in the House for this bill. But this bill basically just puts a tool in the hands of parents, and it says that if a kid wants to download an app, then the App Store has to get parental consent. Seems like it's an easy thing. A couple days before it was supposed to go into effect, of course, we got sued. And so it's in court right now. But we'll follow and we'll do what we need to do to make sure that's successful. But that's the sort of thing that I think we have to do to protect our kids. It's equip parents so that they can be the gatekeepers for their children. The tech companies have not demonstrated a lot of good corporate responsibility, in my opinion, in protecting kids. And so we need to make sure that there are penalties when they don't, but also that parents are in the driver's seat. Another bill that we passed in a previous session, but actually went all the way to the Supreme Court, and we got the win on it while we were in session this last session, was the age verification for online porn sites. So this is another one. Like I said, it went to court almost immediately. It was the Coalition of Free Speech sued the state of Texas over this bill. You might be surprised to know the Coalition for Free Speech is a bunch of porn companies that banded together. I actually wasn't aware that there was a lot of speech involved in that industry, but I guess they did. So anyway, at the end of the day, we prevailed at the Supreme Court. And this is another bill that, because we passed it in Texas and we overcame those hurdles, other states are picking up this bill. They'll do the same thing for the App Store Accountability Act. But another bill, I did not sponsor this bill, but I supported this bill, was TREGA, the Texas Responsible AI Governance Act. This created a big framework. I'm thinking of another word that is...
Architecture?
Thank you. Architecture for AI regulation in Texas. But the basic idea of it is we want to be the leader in innovation in AI, but we want responsible guardrails. So I think those would be three things at the top of my list. And again, I'm so thankful for the help of TPPF in getting support for that bill. And so thankful to Rep. Fairley for her work over in the House. And I'm looking forward to continuing to pick up legislation that we can run point on so that other states can pick it up and it's easy for them.
As you're talking, and thank you for your leadership on that, Senator, how does this all interrelate into national security? I mean, we have a crisis of trust, as Chairwoman Paxton alluded to, and it's critical that we can work with and partner with these companies. We're not asking for these onerous, unreasonable standards. And when you look at the approval rating of certain technology companies being lower than that of Congress, something is desperately wrong. And these are responses to parents who are asking for help and support. And it all plays into, we need to have an ecosystem that's built on trust so we can innovate for the right reasons. Now, Chairman, obviously, you did incredible work on the foreign land ownership bill last session. So many critical victories on protecting Texas from China, Iran, North Korea, et cetera. I know one of the things I've talked with your staff about, and you mentioned drones and ship-to-shore cranes, there are some real vulnerabilities that Texas has in that supply chain. And the instinct, the obvious impulse is, okay, if it's Chinese technology, let's ban it. Let's just get rid of it entirely. And there's certain areas where that may not be the most feasible right now because we don't have those domestic manufacturing capabilities. So the trillion-dollar question is, how do we balance that tension? What can the state do when we don't have the onshore manufacturing abilities, but we're seeing Chinese technology infiltrate the state of Texas?
Yeah, I tell you, that's something that we, when we first started down the foreign-owned land, we were talking about farmland, and then we got to looking into, well, it's not just farmland, it's all kinds of property, and then it's supply chain issues and all kinds of things. And so, yeah, I'll tell you an example that's near and dear to us, and is our drones that are used in our first responders and law enforcement. As high as, some people say, as high as 90% of the drones used by first responders and energy companies are DJI drones manufactured in China. There's a couple of reasons that those are so popularly used. One is they're affordable, so the price is low, and they work. They work well. But the price can be so low because the Chinese government will subsidize the cost of them because they want them being flown over our critical infrastructure, our military installations, our water treatment facilities. And so we had a bill last session that said, hey, look, we're going to, first off, we said, hey, well, why are we doing this? This doesn't make any sense. Let's ban it. Well, we don't have the production to replace them. And then our local governments would be taxed with funding those because, we're talking about a significant cost increase for a domestic drone. And so we had a bill that said, look, we're going to give you 5 years to have an off-ramp to get rid of these and a grant program that'll help fund that gap. And in the meantime, I believe in American capitalism and the free market system that that production, that generation would ramp up because companies would invest in this knowing they had an opportunity to be successful in their investments. And at the same time, that would cause competition, bring the price down, and we could eventually get off of those drones. And so that's something that we're going to be looking at next session. I've been in conversations with the governor's office. I feel confident that we're going to make some big strides towards that end next session. And then, what the federal government did with the CHIPS Act, with those incentives to onshore those jobs here. We've got those big facilities here outside of Austin, up in North Texas, not far from me. And then I think the state needs to step in where they can with economic incentives to try to reward those folks that come here, make that investment to catch up on that supply chain. So the last 30 or 40 years, we've chased the dollar, so to speak, and went where it was the cheapest. And so much of our manufacturing and things have been outsourced to foreign countries. And so you can't just flip a switch and bring that back. That makes a good press release. Hoorah, but it takes some responsible planning and I think good government. We want to do what's right by our people, but I think that's what we need to be doing going forward, is focusing on those solutions to bring those productions back up here.
It's you all shining a light on that. I'm thinking back to the Chinese spy balloon, when that was, oh my goodness, the Chinese capabilities, and wow, went over military bases. And to your point, we've been almost subsidizing that at the state level.
Well, when you buy a DJI drone, you also purchase software from a company called Texas Drone Sense that, in theory, puts a helmet around that piece of technology so that it can't transmit back to Chinese servers. And so if they're not doing this, then why are we having to put a shield around it so that they can't steal our stuff? They can't map our backyard or whatever the case may be. And so that right there screams to me we have a real problem. And another thing, these are vital tools to energy companies, to our first responders. And if China decides to really get after us, they're like, you know what, we're going to fight. All they have to do is stop supporting these drones, stop the software updates, or just say, we're not selling them to you anymore. And then we're sitting here, we don't have these tools. And they have drones now that they can fly into the side of a Navy battleship and blow a hole in the side of it. And it can be very conventional. It doesn't have to be that high tech. I know that they can make projectiles, explosives, with a small thin sheet of copper and a little bit of C4, and they can blow a hole in the side of a battle tank, just like it's hot knife through butter. And so we don't need to be left with the only ones without that. I know the military is not using those foreign-made drones or hostile foreign-made drones. And so, it's a scary thing, y'all. You get to digging into these things, and there's so many areas where we, over time, have allowed these foreign adversaries to get this foothold, and we need to get to work getting that back here.
Same topic, Dean. You mentioned Q-Day. You mentioned some of the advancements in the quantum realm and the investments China's making. Can you put a finer point on where is the U.S. at now in its race against China on quantum? Are you optimistic, and what might encourage or increase that optimism that we win?
Yeah, sure. We certainly feel that our approach as our American values, the way we have led innovation for the last 150, 200 years continues to prevail. We feel like we're in a strong position there. But, to Chairman Hefner's point, China is playing the long game. They're very smart on what they're putting their dollars are. They use capital markets to fund their investments. And so we have to be equally as smart and determined and focused. And quantum is that play. They recognize that's the next wave of innovation. And the country that is able and is focused on delivering that advantage is going to be the country that gets to dictate the next 100 years of national and economic security. So it is vitally important that we act now and that we continue to have advantages like companies like IonQ. And we're not thinking just as a technology company. We're thinking of what we need to do to make sure that our country wins this race, that we win the quantum race. And we're working with Department of War, Department of Energy, Department of Commerce, and ways to how do we build that quantum ecosystem, within the United States. But as importantly, we need to have states that step up and lead. And as we know, Texas is always a leader in not only technology, but the important factors that drive this country's economic security and national security. So right now, we feel like we're in a really strong we're in a really strong position. So we have a tech roadmap for quantum compute where we think we can get to Q-Day before the end of the decade. And we think maybe even sooner. We're in the process of acquiring a microelectronics company called Skywater that has a facility here in Austin near the airport off of Metropolis, the old AMD campus, and that facility. There's a facility in Florida and one in Minnesota that we think is the next wave, is building quantum chips for the future of quantum computers. So that could be right here in the state of Texas. Investment there to modernize that facility after we acquire it, and we think that will be a foundry that is U.S. soiled and will be good for our country. So there's a lot of things that we can do now. We're in the lead. We think we can win the race, but it's going to take not only leadership of this state, but leadership of this country to make sure that we win this race.
And sticking with you, Dean, I'm reflecting now with the creation of the Texas Quantum Initiative, and you talked about why that's so important. I'll ask you a follow-up on it. On artificial intelligence, all the wins that we're talking about on TRIGA, public sector use of AI, we are now the gold standard model for the country, was precipitated by the creation of the Artificial Intelligence Advisory Council. The council was created, we deliberated what are the best solutions, what are opportunities and threats, and then as a consequence, there were informed legislators, the public, et cetera, on how we can actually advance good legislation. So if you're kind of orchestrating the strings on that quantum initiative, how do we ensure that catapults our success in the same way we've seen with artificial intelligence?
Yeah, I would say, we've done some of the hard work because we have the framework now with the Texas Quantum Initiative. We have the Qubit Fund, the Quantum University and Business Innovation for Texas Fund that is set up. So we have a mechanism to go and fund quantum. I think, the one thing I would like to make sure that we have the distinction between what quantum is and what AI is. Quantum technology will take on challenges and problems that are unsolvable today. So they are not in the AI realm. If a human tells a quantum computer to go tackle a particular problem to go solve, that's the only thing quantum will go solve. It's not like AI where it goes and tries to solve any follow-on question. So I want to make that distinction that quantum is different and separate of that, but it will add computational capacity that is not possible today. And I think that as we, again, evolve that and look for the state of Texas to take the lead using the Texas Quantum Initiative and the Qubit Fund, there's a real opportunity for this state to take the lead. And there's a lot of states right now that are vying for that. The state of Tennessee has done a lot on quantum networking. They have a quantum computer. The state of Illinois has $200 million set aside for quantum. State of Florida is putting $100 million. So there's real dollars in real states that are trying to become the quantum hub, and I want to make sure that the state of Texas is the leader, the technology leader when it comes to quantum for a lot of different reasons. And probably the first step is like let's get a quantum computer in the state of Texas, which we do not have right now, and that needs to happen. Other states have already done that, and we need to fast track that as quickly as possible.
I imagine your time at NASA, you can reflect on the NASA computer that would never be in our pockets and everywhere around us, and that's the future with quantum if we do this correctly. Okay, Chairman Hefner, we touched briefly on cybersecurity, and kind of just want to give a high level, take it wherever you like. Governor Greg Abbott created an emergency item last session on cybersecurity, and what followed was the creation of a Texas Cyber Command and kind of a dedicated mission purpose agency on let's figure out this cyber issue. From your perch as chair of the Homeland Committee, what do you see as the state of cybersecurity in Texas? What's going well? What opportunities exist? Just take it wherever you think is most pertinent.
Yeah, so I think we're way better off than we were 2 or 3 years ago with obviously a ways to go. And like you said, the governor made that an emergency item, set up the cyber command down in San Antonio, and so it's a big deal. I mean, you got to look at protecting our water treatment facilities, refineries, our emergency responders, 911 systems, hospital systems, all these things that can be hacked into and can really wreak havoc. And these are things that it's not a conspiracy theory. It's not the sky's falling so that I look like I'm doing something. These things have happened. We've had these cyber attacks where they hit water systems around the country, and it's a serious deal. And so I think with working with people like Dean and on quantum and people that are cyber experts, I'm not a cyber expert, but that marries well with our the committee and the mission of our committee, and so it's right up in our backyard what we need to be looking for. And so I think we're on the right track. We're going to have a lot of demands on our budget next session, and I think that these kind of conversations that we're having, informing the public, educating the public, educating budget writers and decision makers in the legislature on where our priorities need to be. And y'all know how it is. We have a big budget in Texas, over $300 billion over 2 years. A lot of legitimate needs out there, and so a lot of folks are asking for those resources to do things that are important. Some of them may not be as important, but we need to make sure that we're prioritizing those needs and those resources that we have. And I think conversations like, I thank y'all for doing this, because to me this is the way to get that word out and to start letting people hear where the needs are. Sometimes it takes a session or two. The legislature, they're kind of skeptical of things, and we should be that way, right? We shouldn't just be in there doing knee-jerk things based on emotions of the day. We need to work through things and think through them and make sure we're doing the right thing for our people. And I think with the governor's leadership, he's been a great partner, a great leader in so many areas, and I think we're on the right track.
No, agreed. To bring this into the more action-oriented component of this panel, interim charges just dropped, both in the Senate and the House last week. I guess round 2 in the Senate last week. For our members on the panel, you're both chairs, and what are some of the items you're most excited about or you think is related to this discussion you'd like our audience to know what you're going to work on during the interim?
Well, in the Committee for Economic Development specifically, one of the charges that I'm excited about, because it actually brings a lot of things together in one place in the workforce space that I really care about and I think are really important for our future. But one of those charges is just around AI, studying AI, what it needs to look like in the workplace, making sure that we are getting ready for that we're equipping our kids. And so, when we think about workforce, when we think about economic development, we're talking about jobs, right? That's the cell. At the cellular level, we're talking about jobs. And so we know that jobs are going to be changing. We need to make sure that our kids are learning how to use AI in responsible ways. And it's kind of interesting. If any of you have played around with just the skill of prompting, right? Anybody have any mishaps with that? So this past December, I'm very fortunate that my 4 grown kids, all pretty much live in fun places for me to go visit. My oldest daughter, she and her husband met in the military, and they're now stationed in Paris, France. So sad. But anyway, it's like free hotel in Paris. So I went at Christmas, and my son Tucker, who lives in San Francisco, also came out, and he works in the tech industry. So we got my daughter, her husband, the 3-year-old amazing little granddaughter, Tucker, and me. We got this really great selfie in front of the Eiffel Tower. And I think Abby sent it to us, my daughter. And it's so fantastic, except there's this guy, right, as it was snapped, like that's walking behind, and he's like, so it's like a photobomb, right, kind of thing. So anyway, I said on the chat, or the text thread to Tucker, who's the most technologically savvy person, I said, Tucker, you can fix this. And he goes, do you want me to get rid of his head? And I said, yes. So he sends back a revision of this, but like the guy's still there, but just his head is gone. So I have smart aleck kids. And I said, clearly I need to work on my prompting skills, right? So, but actually, if you think about it, the whole idea of prompting, it teaches you to think more critically, right? Because you have to think about, what do I really want to know? And you get better at it as you go. And so I think that actually some of these things, these skills, they actually have the potential of helping us all learn to think more precisely. And that's great for our kids. But we also need to make sure they're aware of the downside. We need to be teaching our kids how to learn for the rest of their lives. Because their jobs, gone are the days where you get a job when you're 25 and you stay in that job all your life. Even if you did, that job would not stay the same, right? And so we know that. So we've got to be looking at how we can converge all of the influences of K through 12, higher ed, adult education, all of those things, so that we have a strong workforce, we have the jobs, and we're producing the talent that can fill those jobs.
Yeah, so I think, first of all, anything where artificial intelligence, it's coming on so fast. And I remember, I guess it was session before last, I can't remember, Chairman Capriglione told me, we were having dinner or something, and he said that even back then, you could basically lay your phone up on the podium while you're having a debate with someone, and as your opponent is speaking, your phone is listening, and it's giving you talking points to rebut what that person is saying in real time. This is 3 or 4 years ago, and I'm like, what are you even talking about? And so I think to me, it's still kind of a mystery. I bought a part from my side-by-side that I work in the yard with. A Good Friday, I was working, it needed to be replaced, and I just put my phone camera down there, and it took a picture of it, and it shopped for me and found a person that I could buy it from. I put my credit card, bought it right there in the backyard, and so where it can be so handy, it's also, we got to be careful where we apply that in government use and how state agencies are using it and what we put into that and where it's going and how it's being used. And so we don't want to restrict innovation and advances. We lead in that because we keep a free market society where people can come up with things, and I think there's a reason that technology around here is advanced so much more than like you see in other countries, because they have such a top-down, bureaucratic, top-heavy system, where ours allows people to innovate and work. And we need to strike that balance between accountability and keeping that innovation open and free. And so that's one of the big issues. Critical infrastructure, I think. Protecting that, I know we've talked about that a little bit here, but how we step in as a state, again, we're talking about maybe private companies that are doing things that we need to make sure that they're taking care of their infrastructure and their systems. And so just so much coming down. We're going to have 3 hearings in our committee through the interim, researching things that the speaker put on the call, and it's exciting time, but it's a challenging time, and so. But looking forward to it.
And Dean, last question, and then we'll get to Q&A, so audience, get ready with your questions. Obviously, you're not a governmental entity with your own hearing set, but you have a lot of exciting advancements with IonQ, acquisitions. So if you want to just give a quick overview on where is IonQ headed in the next couple of months and years here in Texas.
I think to piggyback on what has been said so far, I would say that never in the history of human history have we seen technology advance as fast as it's advancing now. So you've heard some of those examples with the chairwoman and chairman just now on just conveniences, on how AI helps us in everyday life. I think what we're going to see with quantum is that advances, that is going to be the next evolution of human history technological advancement. And what it's going to do is the way AI is now changing the way we engage and work and find information or solve problems, quantum is going to do that at an industrial level. It's going to solve problems that are unsolvable today, not only just for our country, but for the good of the world. And so we're going to have things like quantum computers with the ability that, the way pharmaceutical and drugs are discovered. It takes decades to run the drug trials and the computational capacity that's required to go run different scenarios of those drugs. Now will be done in a fraction of the time than it used to. It'll take on problems that would take a classical computer 1,000 years to solve, and it'll solve it in 10 days. And so that's the kind of technology that's coming to all of us. And I think it's the states that are going to be prepared, the states that lead, and think about post-quantum preparedness today for our critical infrastructure, for how it's going to advance and evolve AI, because it's going to be able to take those large language models that are getting better every time, and how we're becoming better at how we prompt them, but those algorithms are becoming smarter and better every time that they get access to more data. And quantum computing will allow it to get even more data and refine those models faster and even better. So that's what's coming down the pike. Those are the things that IonQ is working on, things that will make sure that our country lead and win that quantum race. The other piece that we haven't talked about a lot is, what is that next wave of high technology jobs that are coming? And it's going to be in the quantum space. So it's the university. We have the greatest university systems in our state. It's going to be, how do we train the next generation of technologists that are going to be here in the state of Texas, that have learned on quantum systems, that either at the University of Texas here in Austin, Texas A&M, Texas Tech, or be able to make sure that we have our students and grad students all working together off systems off those three universities at the same time. That's what the path forward is, and that's what we need to show our leadership in this state today, because somebody is going to lead in quantum, and I want to make sure that they speak English and they're in the United States of America.
And preferably not Silicon Valley.
Can I ask you? You and I have talked before about the importance of who reaches. What'd you call it? Q-Day. Q-Day. So help us understand what happens if we're not first. What are the dangers, and what is the significance of us getting there first?
Yeah, the significance for us being there first is, one, in the near term, whoever gets there first is going to be able to crack the current encryptions that are in place across the internet. And so, as David alluded to, hackers are already gathering files that they're unbreakable today, but they're banking on someday that they're going to have the quantum compute capability to decrypt those. Now, if those files if we take the preparedness route today and put quantum, networking and security in place, they won't be able to get to those files. So it's the ability to plan ahead. We will obviously use it for good, but there's a lot of bad actors that are being prepared to use it for bad, which would take down national grids, would take down, our system of monetary systems, everything that is in place, water, everything that is interconnected is vulnerable. Every market and every industry, I know I'm sounding like, the sky is falling, but it could. And that's why we have to prepare today. And the other part of it is, whoever is there first is able to unlock and be able to use it for good and solve some of the problems that I just described and really change the world, both setting the tone for national and economic security for the world. And it'll set the standards for that. We don't want the Chinese doing that. We want to make sure that the United States of America is setting that tone.
Great ending note. Well, now we have about 10 minutes reserved for audience Q&A. Before I point to the first question, please be pithy and punctuate with a question mark so we can get through as many questions as possible. See that gentleman in the back right there.
Thank you. My name is Don Brown. I'm with Secure the Grid Coalition. I've been in Texas for 36 years and working on the grid since retirement. My question for you is, and it's for all of you really, is, are we moving at the right pace with government and with industry? So we're under attack. It's clear we're under attack. They have ways in through cyber. They have ways to destroy transformers and infrastructure. But do we have a wartime mentality? Should we have a wartime mentality about this? What would it look like within the government to do that? And what are the constraints that we have today that are slowing us down? And I'll give you an example quickly. It took us 5 sessions to get EMP protection even studied, and that's all Senate Bill 75 really does. We still have utilities that are pushing back on any kind of improvements, and by the way, there's improvements that could protect us from solar weather events, from EMP attacks, and they exist, they're proven, but no one's moved forward. No one's calling those manufacturers, and there's funding that could be done at a reasonable rate. How do you free up the funding? How do you move faster on these technologies? You talk about the drone technology. How do we go about in a more organized fashion if we're treating this like it was a wartime, like we're under attack? What would it look like?
I think, government moves slow, and I believe, like Chairman Paxton, I call you Chairwoman? Chairman? Chairwoman?
Supreme Commander.
Supreme Commander. What she say goes. But the states can move so much faster than the federal government, and I've had conversations in my role as chair of this committee with people in Washington about how they want to partner with the states. We passed a bill, we created a committee, David, I don't remember what the technical name, but it's to do tabletop exercises, it's called geopolitical conflict. So it's a committee made up of members appointed by the governor, lieutenant governor, and speaker that get in a room and says, what happens if our critical rare earth materials that we make something out of is cut off? What happens if our food supply is disrupted, or our medical supply, or antibiotics? Almost 90% of our antibiotics, or at least a lot of the critical ingredients, are manufactured in China. And you can imagine what happens if we all of a sudden don't have any antibiotics. And so how do we prepare for that? So this committee is tasked with having meetings ever so often, so that we say what happens, we kind of war game it out, so that tells us what to be doing in the next session. And so we've had one of those meetings. A lot of what we discuss in there is going to be secret because we don't want vulnerabilities and things getting out to our adversaries. And so, but that's one of the things that we're doing as a state is seeing where those vulnerabilities are, and then where can we hit them. And then I think the other thing is, how do we prioritize those needs? Like you say, we have a huge budget, but so many people are after it. And so conversations like these, information, education, helps us know what to prioritize. And then we just need to cut the red tape and move as fast as we can. And so it's a challenge going forward, but there are things set in motion that are pointing us in that direction.
Well said.
I would just add one piece. Unfortunately, it seems like in our country, we have to wait to a catastrophic event before we actually act. And let's not wait for the catastrophic event. And we are in wartime, like we are, and we are under attack every single day. And it's not, as your point earlier, it's not with bombs and bullets. It is by cyber attacks. It's happening every single day. I see it at my own company. We get attacked, whether it's from Russia, North Korea, China. It is happening every single day. So I'm not sure what kind of catastrophic event we have to wait for. A Pearl Harbor or a 9/11 moment. I don't want to see that, and I don't want my kids to have to deal with that. We need to act as quickly as possible. We got to win this quantum race. It will be catastrophic if we do not.
Thank you. Andy.
A lot of talk about data centers, and everybody's phone in this room is connecting to a data center. And when you watch your part for your side-by-side, is that a tractor, by the way?
It's a Kubota RTV, one of those.
Oh, yeah,
got a little
okay.
dump bed on the back of it.
All right.
I
Well,
was cleaning out the flower beds, pulling
Gotcha.
weeds.
Okay, now I know.
Good therapy.
Well, somebody in the government captured that transaction, your credit card number. Would you be in favor of legislation in Texas that would say that your digital data is your property and can't be seized or searched without your permission?
Sure.
Absolutely.
I'll be back.
You already know the answer. TBPF supports that as well, Andy. Thank you for your question.
And if I might add, that is a concept
done
that's
there.
been developing over the last few years, right? But that your data is your property. Your data needs to be your property.
It's not the law now.
I know.
Andre Brunel, thank you very much, very formative. I'm familiar with the Texas CHIPS Act. Is there anything in the upcoming session to support or help the semiconductor sector?
I'm not familiar of anything specific. I know that it's something that everybody's aware of. And I would say that I'm sure we're continuing anything that's already been started. It is critical, though. We've got to control our chips. We don't need to be getting them from China, and we don't need to be selling them to China either, in my opinion.
You know, one of the things that we are required wisely to balance our budget in Texas, and so, which I'm so thankful for. And you know, when you're in session, you want to do all these good things, and you're limited by that. And I think that's something brilliant that our founders of the state put in place, where the federal government can do a stimulus package to help incentivize those cities to come over here. So that's where I was talking about earlier, use our economic tools, economic development tools, and incentive tools that we currently have in place, tax abatements, cutting the red tape, speeding things up. You know, it shouldn't take 10 years to get a permit to put a facility in. And so there's been conversations of how to streamline those processes as a state to speed that up. And I think that's one of the things we can do is lessen that burden of the bureaucratic process in Texas. And so, yeah, so I don't know of anything specific, but that's going to be the general, I would think, our general focus is partnering with the administration in Washington and doing our part as a state and trying to onshore those things that we've foolishly over time let go somewhere else. And they don't have environmental regulations over there. They don't have labor laws. You know, they don't follow the rules, and so it's a challenge. But it's something we need to be focused on for sure.
Next question.
This was released just this morning. I heard this, and I wondered if Dean could comment on it. Mythic, an Anthropic, is a next-generation AI model that hasn't been publicly released because it's too powerful.
Yeah, so when you hear about that, I question sometimes what is being released, or if it's more hyperbole with a really good marketing person behind it. Look, I think as we've talked about, AI is becoming more powerful. It's becoming fine-tuned. These large language models can gather data now and synthesize it much quicker. I think what you're going to see with quantum compute coming online in the next couple of years, it will be part of that work stream. I think much more on the industrial side than the AI side. It will play a role, but again, I think that with the right regulatory oversight, with the right rules in place, making sure that we are finding ways to help evolve and become even more efficient in the way we use the tools, that's going to be the power, and that's going to be the discriminator for our country. I think on the quantum side too is, I do want to again emphasize how it is different. Quantum technology will help AI be even more efficient and better, but it is very different in the methodology in which that technology comes about. It requires less resources from an energy perspective. It doesn't require the same amount of cooling. If you use quantum in a data center, it's going to mean that you need less CPUs and GPUs. So it can be part of the solution to some of the many problems or challenges that we're seeing ahead. And that's the way I'd like you to think about quantum. And it'll be even more important that we lead from the front as a state, like we always do, in that technology, because I don't want to see those jobs in Illinois or other states. They need to be right here in the state of Texas. So that would be my reaction to that particular announcement. Yep. Yep. Yeah.
Thank you. Next question, sir.
Terry Putnam, retired NASA engineer.
Thank you for your service.
I have a question for those of you who might look into the future. Do you see any technology or innovation that is going to protect us from this cyber warfare or anything electromagnetic? In other words, do we have a force field that we can put around the United States to protect us from all of these intrusions? Do you see anything like that coming?
I wouldn't
That
be
sounds
surprised.
like a NASA, that sounds like a NASA question.
Well, I mean, you certainly heard from the president the investment on Golden Dome, so that's a different kind of dome around our country, and we think quantum will play a role in that, especially from the sensing standpoint. So I would say that when you think about a scenario where our adversaries would want to send missiles or other things at our country, it'll be quantum computing that will be required to be able to disseminate quickly what's real and what's not. And because that's part of that kind of cyber warfare that we're talking about, there's adversaries today that can make it look like there's 10,000 missiles coming at us at once, but maybe only 1,000 of them are real. And being able to disseminate what's real and what's not is the hallucination is really hard unless you have the right computing power. So where quantum is going to play and quantum sensing is going to be able to take that information, analyze it, and get it to our decision makers quickly to determine which ones are the ones that you need to take out of the air. And that's what's being in place today, and that's part of what the president has announced with the Golden Dome. So I think that's a real kind of relevant use case where quantum will make a big difference in the world, and then quantum networking will really separate and be the next evolution of cybersecurity that we are working on at IonQ that I think that will absolutely change the game on cyber attacks and the ability and those vulnerabilities.
To yes, and that point, to a specific application, thinking water, again back to Muleshoe. In the late 1990s, there's this technology called SCADA, Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition. It is the legacy technology that animates everything we do in critical infrastructure. For the non-technical nerds, all it does is connect IT with OT. And the idea was, let's make the operations run more efficiently. During COVID, remote work, you can operate the systems remotely. When the DOE released a report on that technology's adoption, they underscored the massive cybersecurity vulnerabilities that they just created for our foreign adversaries. We need that technology air-gapped. We need quantum as a part of that solution. It's not just Muleshoe, it is every water system in the state of Texas that is operating using SCADA. So there are specific recommendations we have at TBPF as well, and I imagine if not in your committee, one of the committees, we'll be talking about some ways quantum can backfill those really just anachronistic technologies that we need to upgrade. Well, we have time for, so I think a microphone there, and then I'll go over here next.
Yeah, my name's Alex Sears. Mr. Acosta, as we approach Q-Day, which is estimated to be reached by 2029, what do those active security countermeasures look like in a quantum world? And will quantum computing be able to provide us with a new level of encryption? Or will cybersecurity look like two quantum-powered AI agents doing battle at the speed of light?
Yeah, no, good question, and I did not plant that. Yeah, so there's a couple of different ways on the cybersecurity front. There's two options. One is post-quantum cryptography, which is called PQC. That's a software layer that goes over anything that you would do with a quantum computer. And there's also a hardware layer that's called QKD, which is quantum key distribution. And it's the way two computers can talk to one another, but they share keys that only the two computers can see. It's unhackable by a quantum computer, and those are the kind of measures that we need to be putting in place today. It helps quantum computers not only connect and network, but they are unhackable by other quantum computers. And so when we talk about developing a quantum computer that will expose vulnerabilities, companies like IonQ is now developing the antidote to make sure that we have those measures in place ahead of Q-Day so that our critical infrastructure is not going to be vulnerable and be taken over by our adversaries. So that's the answer to that question.
Well, thank you. This is the most futurist panel so far at the summit. I really love it. And just wanted to get your thoughts on what do you see the biggest gap is today in terms of talent supply, training pathways, or whatever our legislators can be of help. I would love to get your thoughts. Thank you.
Well, I think, a lot of this, when you think about this as a parent or a grandparent, you can teach your child what you know. And I remember when I was a school counselor, I was working with parents a lot. Facebook was coming in, social media was coming in. And, I used the analogy of when my kids were approaching the age to drive, I had a place to go to kind of think about, how do I want to do this with my kids, right? And, you might go back to, I'm going to do it just like my parents did it, or you might go, I'm going to not do it exactly like my parents did. That's the one thing I'm not going to do. But, as we're looking at these new technologies, you have parents and teachers and employers, but going back to parents, parenting through things they were never parented through themselves. In addition to that, they don't necessarily have a handle on it for themselves. They're learning it at the same time. And so I think we have a really challenging situation here because we have something truly novel for most of us. Now, there are some people in the world that this is not new, right? And, if you watch Terminator, any Terminators, right? What was his mother, Sarah Connor? She was crazy, right? But she knew what was coming, right? But she was crazy. But we're kind of living in that world right now. And so, it sounds like sci-fi, but it's true. And I think the thing that I think is very important here, and I think about this from the economic development perspective, but also from an education perspective, is that we all need to be working together, and we need to be listening to each other because none of us know everything about this. I think it's really important that we're coordinating, that we're listening, so we can learn, so we can lead. And, I appreciate the work TPPF does. They do such great research to help us on the policy side to try to get in front of these things. And, you're right, government is notoriously slow, and the only thing slower than state government is federal government, right? But it's the nature of things. It's what we have to work with. And I think that this stuff is truly bipartisan, though. I think that's one of the opportunities here. It is truly bipartisan. And we can work together on these things that will really protect our future. Nothing defines the future, in my opinion, like our kids. They are literally the future. And so I think we can all work together, and we must work together if we are to be successful. Thank you.
All right, I think we have time. Oh, no, we do not. I'm getting the cut. Well, then I'll take a moment for, everyone boo, Eric, we're out of time. Sorry. I will take a moment for a last word. The foundation in the next week or two will be publishing a research paper on quantum technology broadly. And so that's everything from networking and sensing and the key distribution that we talked about today. And so to the points that have been made, we want to be convening where we can have discussions about those future-looking technologies. We're in a unique position in Texas now to be striking on the jobs, the economic growth, but also to really just position our country's future trajectory. We're going to surpass California economically at some point, and it's going to be driven by the tech sector. So be on the lookout for that because I cannot speak as fluently as Dean. We're trying to get there, but we'll continue to work with our partners to make sure we truly have a cogent framework in mind. But without further ado, would you please join me in thanking our fantastic panelists?